Thank you for listening to this edition of the Christian Car Guy podcast. It's brought to you by Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road. Mr. Quick Pick is the opportunity for you to start your own roadside assistance business. If you have more investment energy than investment capital, stop working for someone else. Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road is the opportunity to have your own home-based business, working directly with auto clubs and leveraging a national brand and marketing strategy. Mr. Quick Pick helps people who have run out of gas, locked their keys in their car, or need a jump start. An A-plus rated company with the Better Business Bureau and the 3-time winner of the Members' Choice Award for customer service. This could be the chance you've been looking for to serve others at the point of crisis and even share your walk with Christ. So whether you're looking for a business opportunity or in need of emergency roadside assistance, choose Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road. MrQuickPick.com. Now sit back and enjoy this podcast of the Christian Car Guy Radio Show.
I'm covered with grease from my head to my feet. My hands are cut and calloused. Spent all my bucks on a broke down truck, broke down $7.
Christian Car Guy Radio Show.
I say this calls for action, and now, nip it in the bud. Nip it in the bud. You got to nip it in the bud.
10 miles from town, and I just broke down, spitting out smoke on the side of the road. I'm out here alone, just trying to get home. They tell you I was wrong, but you already know.
When was your Jesus breakdown? That may sound a bit crazy, but let me explain. First, you may have experienced a car breakdown on the side of the road, and that might help explain the Jesus breakdown. This is when you failed, or I failed, to take Barney Fife's advice and nip it in the bud. I was hearing this pesky tick, tick, tick and hoping it would go away. Then the oil light flickered on for a second and went off, and I figured, oh, that was a fluke. And once again, failed to nip it in the bud. Next, I was hundreds of miles down the highway. The light came on for just a few moments, and when this horrible sound happened, the car coasted dead as a hammer to the side of the road. Well, similarly, we will all, I believe all of us, face Jesus breakdowns. So what in the world is a Jesus breakdown? Well, a number of years ago, I thought I had this really cool idea for a show. My thought was to call it Jesus Take the Wheel and have people call in and tell me where they were when Jesus took the wheel. And I thought, well, and that part where I said, I thought, well, that's where I'm sure Jesus and the Father had a good belly laugh over, Robbie thought that people would call in with their stories where Jesus took the wheel in a car accident situation and they were miraculously saved, and maybe I'd even get some folks to call in and share where Jesus stepped into their life situation, and it was going to be amazing. So I went with it. I got the Carrie Underwood song to start the show. I told my own story of when I was with my little brother in the car, and I almost got us both killed. I actually let go of the steering wheel while we were spinning out, and Jesus somehow kept us between the curbs. Well, that's the kind of story I expected. Again, I'm sure the Trinity were having a great laugh when I got the call. The call I'm going to share in a minute, and it was a Jesus breakdown moment. And I would define it as this. In Isaiah 61, Jesus quoted that prophecy as fulfilled in him. In Luke, it says that clearly Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. And I've come to understand is it may be involved in that process. What may be involved in that process, I think, may be these Jesus breakdown moments. You see, Jesus loves us so very much, sometimes he will totally disrupt our lives. In other words, to totally break us down on the side of the road in order to get our attention so we can heal and restore our broken hearts. It kind of reflects something that's going on. So the reason he's doing that is we can love him and our neighbor once again with a whole heart, because if he can get to that part of our hearts that's broken, he can actually restore it. Because when you look in that Passion Isaiah 61, it's almost like a heart that is shattered into fragments like a broken piece of glass. Well, he's trying to give us that little piece of our heart back so we can have our whole heart. Now, on today's show, I'm hoping and praying, really, that you will consider calling in with your Jesus breakdown story. You can call us at 866-348-7884. So here is that call that rocked my world a few years ago, and in my view, clearly illustrates a Jesus breakdown.
Good morning.
What have you got for us?
Well, I was had some back problems, and I was catching a ride with my girlfriend to a chiropractor.
Wow.
And she ran a stop sign, and we got broadsided, and I lived through it, and that's the day Jesus took control of my car.
Oh, wow, really?
Really.
And was there more injuries because of the accident?
Oh, yeah, I'm paraplegic now.
Oh, wow. So you found yourself just in a whole different world on the other side of that accident.
Way different world.
Well,
but my eyes were opened.
Can you share that just a little bit with our listeners, Joe?
Well, I was off onto some Hindu stuff that a friend of mine got me into, and had given up my belief in Jesus. And after that accident, everything came home for me.
And that something that you had been taught as a younger person, and then you started to see it again?
Yeah, I was raised as a Christian, but this friend of mine got me into this Hindu business. But after that accident, I was awakened.
Well, what a testimony you have, I would think, Joe, in your situation, as other people look and see, what do you tell them when they say, well, what reason do you have for hope, Joe?
Jesus saved me.
And what a blessing that is. I've often heard that the reason that Jonah was so effective, Jonah and the whale,
You're right,
was that when he was swallowed by that fish, that apparently that's happened in history to a couple of people, that it bleaches their skin out to where it's just bright white and they have no hair. And
darn.
And so here comes Jonah into Nineveh, a bright white-looking guy with no hair. And the rumor gets around that this guy's been swallowed by a fish and he's been spit up. Now he tells you to repent. It comes out a little stronger in that case, Joe. So that's why I think you've got a rare testimony out there. And I'm so thankful that you called us, Joe.
I'm glad you guys are on the air.
God bless you. You keep giving the hope out there. Thank you, Joe.
I sure will. Bye.
Bye. So there was that soundbite, and now the question is back in your court. What was your Jesus breakdown where he disrupted your life, had you on the side of the road, sort of called time out for you to rethink some things? And how did that work out for you? Maybe it worked out in conjunction with your car like it did for Joe, but I would love to hear that story. I know our listeners would hear that story because some people right now may be having something like this going on in their life, and it's hard to interpret that this could be actually a disruption from the Lord to try to get our attention, and your story could, and I'm sure will in many cases, encourage them. So the number to call, 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. For those who are digitally gifted, we would love to hear from you. And for those that happen to be in the Winston-Salem area this morning, and I hate that for those of you who are not, but it's such a beautiful day here. But I'm sure it's beautiful wherever you are, and I'm probably out of luck that I'm not in your area. But for those who are in the Winston-Salem area this morning, if you call in, we have some Wake Forest basketball tickets to give away. And the challenge there is that we need to give those away before 12:30 today, so you'll have to come get them. But if you call in with your story and you want these tickets, by all means, tell the producer, and he will get them for you. Again, we're off North Point Boulevard in Winston-Salem. So please, I'm asking you, call in and share like Joe did. It took a lot of courage, I'm sure, that day to do it. But think how it encouraged you to see how God came through for Joe. 866-348-7884. And along those lines, I do want to talk about what you can do to keep your car from being broke down on the side of the road. We're going to share a little bit of that today. And today we also have a Jesus of Labor Love applicant I talked with yesterday, a widow with 2 children at home, recently widowed. Her husband just died a couple years ago, and I think this story will touch you, but also see how God's working out there in her life. And in our last segment today. That's our appraisal by the Real Black Book. That's where we search the Bible for hidden treasure, cry out for discernment, lift up our voice for understanding. Well, as I mentioned in Isaiah 61, Jesus offered to bind up our broken hearts. And have you ever gotten into a car and it's get up and go? It's just kind of got up and went somewhere, no pickup, just kind of tries, but it just doesn't have it? Well, that car has lost something it once had. As a matter of fact, it's been stolen. The same as the enemy we face. And I'll bet you know someone unemployed. They act like they really want a job, but they get up and go has got up and went. Well, lots of folks will judge them and say they're just lazy or scared. But chances are, however, they have lost something. And it, too, was stolen by the same enemy. And Jesus can help. And we're going to share that coming up in our last segment in our appraisal by the Real Black Book. And as always, we want to mention that we have all this information at ChristianCarGuy.com, as well as The Widow Who Needs Help. The whole story, in fact, that soundbite, if you want to play it for somebody about the man that was in the wheelchair, I've put that at the Christian Car Guy. It says, your Jesus breakdown there. And if you go there, you can play that soundbite for anybody else or listen to podcasts from previous shows. See what's with Jesus Labor Love Ministry for single moms, widows, and families in crisis. It's all there at Jesus, or it's at ChristianCarGuy.com. And we've got Jennifer in Seattle coming up after the break. She's got a breakdown story, but we would love to hear yours. Oh, would we love to hear yours? 866-348-7884. Please call with your story. I would love to hear it. 866-348-7884. So much more Christian Car Guy Show coming up.
Well, if you ever plan to go to West,
Covered with grease from my head to my feet. My hands are cut and calloused. Spent all my bucks on a broke down truck. Broke down $7.
When were you broke down on the side of the road? You're listening to the Christian Car Guy Show, and today we're talking about Jesus' breakdown story. When did he have you there? I know you have a story. We would love to hear it. 866-348-7884. He often disrupts our lives in order to get our attention. We have Jennifer is in Seattle, Washington. She's got a story for us. Jennifer, you're on the Christian Car Guy Show. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. How are you today?
I am so thrilled and honored that you would call and share this. So I'm anxious to hear.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I appreciate that you guys are doing this. So my backstory is I was brought up in a unchristian. My mom was a drug addict. My husband had rebelled against his wonderful Christian parents, and we met as teenagers in part of the, party scene in Seattle. And so I was really involved in drugs, heavy drugs, and had a near-death experience as a teenager. God really used that to start wooing me to him, and I became a believer when I was 21. And
Wow.
then I got involved in religion, but I didn't really have a strong relationship. It's so interesting how those two can parallel each other.
Oh,
The
yes.
world says be strong and be productive and you'll fit in, and you get involved in church and it's really the same thing, or can be, I should
Oh,
say.
yeah.
And
It happened to me. Believe me, I understand, yeah.
Yeah. And so we went through, we were heavily involved in a few different churches. The first church, the senior pastor had moral failure, and it was devastating. He was like a dad to me. It was awful. I was part of what broke that story when he assaulted a woman. And, that really left me kind of in a wilderness place with, God, where do you fit in? And if this is your bride, you could do better. And just a lot of anger and bitterness toward the church. And God really started using that to draw me closer to him and that audience of one, and realizing that captivity can come in all sorts of shapes. And so in the meantime, we're building businesses and, being successful. And as a poor kid, that's, I think as a Christian, we think that if God loves us, then we're blessed. And so, we were feeling real blessed. And so clearly we must have been pleasing God. But there were some areas of our businesses that were not under the authority and not under the leadership of Christ. And it was not for his glory. So in 2007, I started realizing like there's something missing. And he brought me, I said, I want you to make me a woman of prayer. And careful what you ask for, because he literally stripped us bare. And we had lost church family, we lost real relationships close to us, and God really led us out into this wilderness place, which to anybody, I remember thinking, God, my life is falling apart. What must people think? And he said to me through his word and how he speaks to my heart, consider Calvary. And he took me to that place where that day it looked like complete failure. And, everything was falling apart, and the disciples didn't know what to do, and the Pharisees thought they won, and the Romans were mocking him, and God was doing his most powerful work there. And that's exactly what he was doing with us. And he left us in that wilderness spot for 5 years. And man, when he said move, we learned to move. And when he said stop, we learned to stop. And we really learned what it meant to depend on Jesus and bring our whole life under his lordship. I'm not going to tell you we've got it all together or have all the answers, but I can say, our relationship with God and how big and real he is has become so much, there's less fear because he's in control. And
Jennifer, can I just say that, wow, you've spoken to hopefully thousands of people's hearts right there, but you're so to the point of what we're talking about. I mean, it's exactly how he works. But
captivity can come in all different. Captivity isn't necessarily a dirty cell. There are golden cages.
Absolutely, but the thing that God has been showing me here in the last couple of weeks, because we do these boot camps where we help men get their hearts back, because a lot of people end up as couch potatoes. You're there, you don't know what the battle is. I'm supposed to fight for you, Lord. You ask you to be in prayer, but when you really go there, he may take you on an adventure you had no idea. But the cool thing is, he gives you your heart back, and when you have a whole heart, I can tell by the way that you're approaching your life is so much more fun that when you're taking Jesus along with you, right?
Oh, my gosh, it is such an adventure. And my husband and I look at each other sometimes. We've been married 27 years, which defies, if we had bets against, how long
with the
coming out of
sure.
drug culture. I got married when I was 17 years old. So, to be celebrating almost 30 years of marriage this year. And, we just look at each other sometimes and go, okay, if this is what Jesus wants to do, we trust him. And every single time he shows up, and it doesn't always work out the way that we think it should or that it would be comfortable, but it's always right and it's always good. And, when those passages were spoken to the people in Israel about captivity or, about God having a plan and a future, they were headed to captivity and in captivity already. So if you're there, seek God, cry out to God, and he'll show up. But you got to be honest about it. Until I was ready to be honest, it wasn't going anywhere.
Jennifer, God bless you. I cannot
God
tell
bless
you.
you too, man. Thank you so much
What
for
a testimony.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Wow. I bet you're thinking, wow. I know I am. And you got a story. I know you do. And we want to hear it too. I think there's a lot of people out there that find themselves totally disrupted in a really tough place out in the wilderness. What's God up to? 866-348-7884. 866-348-7884. And that's what's happened for, we have this Jesus of Labor Love ministry. Single moms, widows, families in crisis. And we have this widow I'm going to talk about when we come back out of the break, plus hopefully take several more calls of people that have the courage to call in and share when Jesus had you on the side of the road. A Jesus Breakdown, 866-348-7884. Call now. We got lines open.
spitting out smoke on the side of the road. I'm out here alone, just trying to get home. To tell you I was wrong, but you already know.
When was your Jesus breakdown? What in the world is a Jesus breakdown? Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Christian Car Guy Show, and that's today's topic. You know, when you don't nip things in the bud and your car may break down on the side of the road, often Jesus is giving us little pokes that, you need to address this or whatever the situation is, and then you don't pay attention and end up with a Jesus breakdown moment. We would love to hear yours. 866-348-7884. 866-34-TRUTH. I'll say it slow because my wife says I don't always do that. 866-348-7884. And as always, we have all this information at ChristianCarGuy.com. We have that soundbite I played earlier. I have another soundbite I'm going to get to here in a minute of the bookmark. It's interesting. God had people call in that particular show I talked about earlier, all during that show, and there was a particular story about a man that ended up a paraplegic at the beginning of the show, and then there was one at the end of the show that was almost as breathtaking to me that illustrated the point of what a Jesus breakdown is, and we're going to get to that in a second. But first I want to talk about my widow, who I talked with yesterday. She's had the real breakdown. You know, she lost her husband 2 years ago, and she had 5 children. Now she still has 2 at home. And she was in Virginia. She had a Saturn, a 2006 Saturn, or she has a 2006 Saturn with over 200,000 miles on it. And she knew it was leaking oil, so she went to AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts, I don't remember which one, and they helped her check it, and they helped her fill it up, and she got a little ways down the road. Then she heard this horrible sound, and actually the piston went through the side of the block. So there she was. She got the car towed to a nice, she says, very nice man there, but it needs another engine, and even a new used engine for her is going to be nearly $1,800, and she lives, a state away from where the car is. She's gotten back home, but, the man is trying to get it fixed. We're trying to help her, but we'd asked clearly that you pray for her, her needs. She's applicant, as I recall, 602. But if God leaves it on your heart to donate to her situation, again, we have no administration costs other than whatever they take if you go through PayPal or whatever. If you send us a check, there's no administration cost. But you can go to ChristianCarGuy.com and donate to her cause, or you can send us a check, and there'll be no fees. It's the Jesus Labor of Love. It's 238 Saura, S-A-U-R-A Lane, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27107. Again, the Jesus Labor of Love, 238 Saura, S-A-U-R-A Lane, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27107. It is a 501c3. It's totally tax deductible. And again, if God puts it on your heart, obviously this is a huge need, and we have run almost clear out of resources that we have for this kind of thing. So anything you can do would be a huge help. Sometimes I'm blessed out of my mind just by people that donate, whatever they can do. And so we're so grateful for that. So she is obviously undergoing one of those Jesus breakdowns. But one of the questions we have, and I think you can encourage us with your story, is when Jesus got your attention through one of these breakdowns. And again, here's the soundbite from the last call I got when I did my Jesus Take the Wheel show. I'll never forget.
Good morning. This is Harry.
Yes, Harry, can you share with us?
I just want to do it real quick because I hear you got short time. Listen, I was in college when this incident happened. A very popular student leader, and just really, as a PK, I was expected to be good in church. And
I understand.
So anyway, on July 30th of that given year, my mother pulled me aside and just asked for the condition of my life. And I told her, I'm glad you asked, because I really am tired of being a hypocrite. And I says, as any hypocrite knows, we know who all the hypocrites in church are, and these guys are all hypocrites. So I don't mind. I'm going to quit. So anyway, she's kind of shocked. I mean, I had never done this because I was always the, Mr. Nice Guy and student leader and youth leader in church and all this other stuff. So she was just totally shocked. So we had a long discussion past midnight, and finally I said, look, I'm tired of this. I'm going to bed. She says, can we pray? I says, Mom, I just told you I don't believe in God, and you want me to pray to someone I don't believe? Forget it. Walked out, went to the bathroom, finished off, and as I got out, I was hearing her cry and weep before the Lord, and just carrying on. And I just laughed, and I said, this is crazy. And the next day, I just went to work, had a full day of work. At the total end of the day, I'm driving home. And as I'm driving home, I went a different way because my recently sold car, or I should say my cousin's recently sold car, was driving in front of me. So I caught up with the guy, talked with him, and went this other way. Well, so here I am on the city street, and I'm ready in the city of Milwaukee at the time, and we're ready to roll. There's a Cadillac standing next to me, and I had this AMC car, which back then in the days, you understand, everybody loved AMC, right? So we're street racing in a city street which barely has a lane and a half, okay? And we're tearing off. We're doing in excess of 90 miles an hour on the city. And suddenly in front of me, there's this Buick Skylark. Well, I see this car, and I said, oh, my God, I'm going to kill this guy who's just hanging out in front and on the passenger side talking to somebody. So I'm trying to figure out how to get past the Cadillac and get past me or slow down and get behind it. Meanwhile, the caddy sees my indecision, cuts me off, and so now I have no choice. I've got to do what I got to do. So I tag the caddy, and that takes me into a spin. Where did the guy land? I don't know. Later on, we figured out he vaulted over the car to save his life, and I think the angel just picked him up and threw him across. Anyway, I don't have my seatbelts on. I am falling clear across the car. I say, I got to get control of the car. I get back up, pull the steering wheel up, only to see that I'm head-on hitting into a big old Ford LTD, and crash. It was a head-on collision, and that was the end of it. The ambulance driver picked me up, and they said that the guys always would take bets to see how long a person would be in the hospital. Well, what happened was my mom actually had that day that the Lord was going to punish me, and she was praying for my life. And when she heard the ambulances going past the house, she already told my dad to get up and get ready to go to hospital. I'm in an accident.
So you gave your heart to the Lord?
My heart to the Lord through an intern who was there and who led me back to the Lord and said, you got to live a different life. That is a true story.
Wow. You know, what can you say? That's a Jesus breakdown right there. He loves us so much that sometimes he pursues us in ways that we would never dream. And I know you have a story on your heart. I would love to hear it. And there may be people out there who need to hear it. So please call us 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. And as the Christian Car Guy, of course, I get all kinds of emails, letters, and stories through the Jesus Labor Love Car Repair Labor for Single Moms, Widows, and Families in Crisis. I hear all these stories. And so I have some ideas on how we can keep from getting broke down on the side of the road, because there's these little nagging things. And the reason why I love that little soundbite from Barney Fife is it's so true when it has to do with your car is you got to nip these things in the bud. I mean, you think it's going to go away, but it's not necessarily going to go away. And one of them is oil leaks. It's leaking oil. Now, I'm not talking about it's leaking a drop or two, but when it starts leaking out a quart or more a week, you got to do something, because you can end up on the side of the road. And the other thing when it comes to oil, and so often it breaks my heart when it happens, is you got to change it. They put a little thing up there in the window when they change your oil. It tells you in 3,000 miles or 6,000 miles or whatever it is that your owner's manual tells you to do. You've got to change your oil. And it's very important with certain cars, if it's synthetic oil, that you use synthetic oil, because that synthetic oil won't coagulate and cause problems. And so it's kind of, I tell people all the time, and there's plenty of links at ChristianCarGuy.com. Get your owner's manual, find out what kind of oil you use, make sure you use that. Another thing this time of year, a lot of people think, well, it's starting to get cold and a possibility to freeze has to do with your coolant and, checking it to make sure that it won't freeze. Well, you may find in your owner's manual, and a lot of people are surprised to know that you have to flush your radiator quite often. And this is one of the biggest problems with people that end up having blown head gaskets is they didn't flush their radiator. They ended up with a problem in their coolant system. Their car overheats, and then you blow the head gasket, and here we find ourselves needing an engine again or on the side of the road. Nip it in the bud. That's kind of the thing. Well, we've got so much more Christian Car Guys show, but just one more segment for you to call in and share. 866-348-7884. Call us. When was your Jesus breakdown? We just have one more segment to get it in, so you need to call us 866-348-7884. Or if you're digitally gifted, that's 866-34-TRUTH, because I work for the Truth Network. So the idea of a Jesus breakdown is, he's been pursuing you in whatever way. There's been maybe an idiot light that's been flashing on your internal dash, whatever that looks like, and you keep wanting to ignore it, thinking that's just a fluke, it's going to go away, or maybe there's been this steady drip, 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 whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, things change. Well, what if you're a clown and you're on stilts and you've been running away from God for years? Well, it just so happens. I know you're saying, Robbie, that's unbelievable. No, it's not, because I have such a person right here in front of me. He's Pastor Toby. and Pastor, that's kind of your story.
Yeah, I worked as a professional clown for 26 and a half years and planned this walk across the state of Illinois on 3-foot stilts in memory of my father, who died when I was 3 years old. It was a 333-mile journey. And I'd been running from God for years. I hadn't been going to church, hadn't been doing the things I was supposed to do. And in the middle of the walk, in a town called Tower Hill, Illinois, I went in the makeup that morning in front of the mirror, and I began to put the makeup on, and the Lord spoke to my heart. And he said, I love you for who you are. You don't need to put the makeup on anymore. And just go and be yourself. And it just, everything changed from that moment on. I was set free that day because I accepted Christ back into my heart, and I began to follow him the way he wanted me to. And it was an incredible journey. And ever since then, my life has been so blessed. I came to a northern state to find a southern girl, and today we're celebrating 6,202 days of wedding bliss. We're so happy together. And my life has just changed for the better. And I wasn't a pastor back then, but I'm a pastor now. See, God has a sense of humor, doesn't he?
He chooses a lot of clowns to get in the ministry. I understand. And I love the mask. We all have those that we're wearing, and he often, disrupts our lives to get us to take off the mask. And so getting to what you still have time to call in and share your story, and I would love to hear it. 866-348-7884. But getting to I want to tell you a couple more things about don't do this as far as, the lights blinking, nip it in the bud, like Barney Fife says, do something. If it's making that noise, it's making that rattle, brakes or another thing. You're hearing that scraping in the brakes? Please don't wait till you ruin your rotors and all that stuff. You'll end up on the side of the road. It's trying to get your attention. There's all sorts of ways that happens. One that doesn't often get your attention is your air filter. Okay, do you know that 20 gallons of gasoline requires your car to suck in 20,000 cubic feet of air? In other words, all the air that's in your house goes through your car every time you use a tank of gas. And so in the springtime, whatever, when all that pollen's in the air, your air filter, it's just one of those things. And we don't want you on the side of the road. So moving to our appraisal by the Real Black Book. That's where we search the Bible for hidden treasure, cry out for discernment, lift up our voice for understanding. Well, as I mentioned in Isaiah 61, Jesus offered, right, he's going to bind up the brokenhearted. And I mentioned this. Have you ever gotten into a car and its get up and go has got up and went? You know, it's got no pickup. It just kind of tries, but it doesn't really take you anywhere. And that car has lost something. And as a matter of fact, it's been stolen from that car and by the same enemy that may be stealing stuff from us. And I'll bet you know somebody who's unemployed or maybe they are employed, but it just seems like they're not getting anything out of life. The couch potato, their get up and go has got up and went. Well, what happened? Well, what happened was they've got a broken heart. And Jesus wants to bind up. He wants to give you back those pieces of your heart. Now, there's a story. You may have heard of John Eldredge. He wrote the book Wild at Heart. But what you may not know is he really, really, really wanted write a book called Walking with God. And he kept on saying, this is the book I want to write. I want to write this book. And God kind of got a hold of him like he did you, Toby. And he said, no, I can't walk with these men until they get their heart back. Because you can't love God with a half a heart, like Solomon. He wants the whole deal. And so he had John write the book Wild at Heart. And Wild at Heart, as you may know, is a gazillion bestseller, one of the Christian books of all time, where it explains that men have an adventure to fight, a beauty to rescue, as Jesus does, right, his church, and an adventure to live, a beauty to rescue, and a battle to fight. And in order to do that, you got to have your heart back. And if we look into God's heart, we get a picture of our own heart. And if God is all about rescue and the beauty, and if he's all about adventure, and he's all about fighting this battle against evil, then he's got that for us too. And there's ways that we can go about getting our heart back. And Jesus wants to set you free to be able to do that. But you can't ignore the idiot light that's flashing off on your dashboard. It's telling you, if you're laying on the couch and you feel like giving up, that there's something in your heart that's broken and he wants to come and give you that back. If you came to me and said, Robbie, you got to get up tomorrow morning and go rake leaves at 4 o'clock in the morning, the chances are, I'm just saying, and my wife would tell you this, Robbie would not be jumping out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning full of vim and vigor. However, if you told Robbie, you get to go fishing tomorrow morning at 4, but you got to get up at 4 o'clock and you got to drive 6 hours to the coast, and, Robbie would be jumping out of bed. Why? Because I want to do that with all my heart. That's a desire. That's where that comes from. Well, who put those desires in your heart? It's God, and he gave you a desire for adventure. He gave you these desires. And so as we begin to figure out how can we get our heart back, it's not something he's just going to give us. We've got to pursue this. And did you hear what my caller said in the I think her name was Jennifer, in the second segment, that she begged God to be a woman of prayer, and she said, be careful what you pray for, because well, think of what she said. To be a woman of prayer means that I get to talk to Jesus. I get to talk to God all the time. I heard it once said, and I love this, and I think it was the guy who does Focus on James Dobson said it, that there was this man, and he had lost his wife, and it used to be he would occasionally pray, and he felt like he picked up the phone and called God, but he wanted to get to the point in his life where he never hung up. And in that, your story? Isn't that my story? That to be a man of prayer would mean that I not only dial the phone, but then I never hang up so God can go on this adventure. And let me ask you this, Toby, since I got you right there in front of me, since you picked up the phone, has the adventure, could it get any more wilder than it's gotten for you and your wife?
No, it's been amazing. And really, when you follow God and do what he asks you to do, he makes a way, and that's what we're discovering. Sometimes it's not our way, but most of the time it's his way, and that's what we have to learn to do, is just allow him and surrender. Just surrender to him.
There's lots of stuff out there. Once we surrender to him, there's an amazing thing. He points us to people. He points us to books. He points us to his book. Fall in love with that book, and I bet you there's ways to get your heart back. I mean, it's just, he is going to put it in your path if you really, really devote yourself back to that relationship between him and yourself. Well, thank you for listening to the Christian Car Guys show today. As always, I want to mention ChristianCarGuy.com, where we have the Jesus Labor of Love. That's one of the menu buttons there. That's car repair labor for single moms, widows, families in crisis. You can find out all about our current needs and all that stuff there. But I am just honored that you listened today. Thank you so much. And remember, slow down. Jesus walked everywhere he went, and he got it all done in 33 years. Thank you for listening to the Christian Car Guy Show.